Welcome to the My First Deal podcast, where we do a deep dive into the first deals of new and experienced investors. Oftentimes, when you're just starting out, that first deal can seem a million miles away. I started this podcast for those of you just starting out in real estate investing, or those of you who have been doing it for a bit and haven't gotten your first deal yet. These stories will hopefully inspire you to keep going, because chances are it's right around the corner. Before I bring our guest in, please do me a favor and subscribe to the channel and follow us on all socials at Alex and Lauren Real Estate. We're documenting our journey from total beginner to financially free, hopefully inspiring you to get started today. Now, let's not waste any more time. Today, my guest is Davin Burnell. I saw him post a really cool story on a Facebook group, and it really just kind of got me pumped up. And so I reached out to him, and he said, sure, man, let's talk about it. And you guys are going to love what he has to say. All right, Davin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on your Sunday. I know you're super busy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Right on, man. Okay, so maybe just right now, I just want to introduce yourself, kind of let people know how you got into real estate investing, and sort of paint a picture of what your life was like before real estate, and then kind of what led you up to, your first deal.
Yeah, so absolutely. I can definitely paint a picture of that. So I guess I'll start with how I got started in real estate. So my actual start in real estate was working with CBRE, which is a large commercial real estate empire. They have a global office, retail, land leasing, brokerage, investment sales business. So I actually started out at CBRE as a research data analyst. And while in corporate America at CBRE, I kind of started to figure out okay, I don't know if the whole 9 to 5 work for 40 years type of thing is for me. And so I got my start finding out about wholesaling the same way that a lot of people do. I started out with one of the OGs, Max Maxwell, and he's talking about buying houses with no money and flipping them and showing checks for like $30,000, $40,000. And I'm like, that's a lot of money to be getting at one time. And so how I kind of got started in real estate was following the age-old advice of, okay, looking through pre-foreclosures, calling the county, doing water shutoff lists, vacant houses, that sort of thing. And the first list that I actually called was a water shutoff list. And I'm calling people. This is just a weekend. I think I called a total of like 10 people. And there was a guy who picked up the phone, and he was actually in the hospital, is what he told me. And he was like, yeah, we shut the water off. I'm in the hospital. I suggest you talk with the agent. And I'll never forget, man. I'm sitting there talking to this guy, and he's like, yeah, talk to the agent. And in my head, I'm like, oh, wait, all these people are saying, we don't talk to on market, deals. We don't do deals with agents, all these people on YouTube and everything like that. This was a few years back. This is 2019, just for a little bit of scope. And I think something in me kind of clicked, and I was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, we actually don't do deals with agents. Good luck, type of thing. Because in my mind, it's like, oh, we don't do deals with agents. Now I know that there's so many different ways to have an amazing career in real estate, networking with all types of people and businesses, from realtors and brokerage shops to hedge funds and all these amazing types of different personas that are involved in the real estate game. And so I guess how I got started moving from there was I kind of just backed off of like the whole real estate thing. And I kind of took, I guess, a little bit of a hiatus. I didn't do anything in real estate, pick up the phone, make a single call probably for about 2 more years since then.
Okay, awesome. And that kind of leads you up to getting back into it, and then your first deal.
Yeah, so that leads me to getting back into it, getting my first deal. So we can definitely go into that. I know that's what we're here for.
Exactly. Yeah. And I kind of, we kind of spoke about this, on our phone call, but the reason I made this was the show was because I'm getting hit up by people that are just starting out, and that first deal seems a million miles away. Like you said, you're seeing Max do it. You're seeing like Pace Morby, all these guys,
Right.
Dropping checks, even on the Facebook group. And then I just love seeing when people post, man, I got my first deal. You had like a really awesome story about all the stuff you had to go through. And so, so why don't we just dive right into it? Why don't you give a brief breakdown of how it all unfolded? And then I'll have some follow up questions, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Let's get right into it. Excited to talk about it. So, the way I got this deal was, I believe the list that I was calling was a pre foreclosure list. For a little bit of scope at the time, I was living in New York, but I wanted to run marketing in South Carolina, where I'm born and bred, Charleston, South Carolina, from the 843.
Nice.
And I was calling on lists, and I ultimately got to this super sweet, super kind lady who we had an amazing conversation. She knew everything about Charleston. She lived in an area, I think, called like Somerville or like Goose Creek, somewhere in the upstate of South Carolina. But she had recommended a specific area where there was a lot of people moving in and out, lots of hot real estate activity, all the amazing things that we want to see, right, as real estate investors. And so she says, we had built up a ton of rapport, and she goes, you know what, why don't you call on Sangaree, South Carolina? I'm like, perfect. So I ran a pre-foreclosure list of Sangaree, which is a small town in Somerville, South Carolina. And I'm calling people, and I called, I think, what was like the 10th or 11th person. There's a person named Lawrence Bress. And I pick up the phone, and this guy is awesome. He immediately goes into this long soliloquy of like everything that's going on in his life. And he's like, oh, I've got this ex-wife that's living in the house, and she didn't let me move into the house because she said, I have too many cats, and, I got a VA loan on this house. This house is in Sangaree. I live in Atlanta. Once COVID hit, one of the big things that hit us was we lost our jobs. We're struggling financially. All the bills, the mortgage is not being paid. And he rounds out that long speech, long soliloquy with, but yeah, I don't think you can help us. And I was like, wait. And in my mind, it's like, I just watched 2 Pace Morby videos. I'm an expert at all of this. And so if you know Pace Morby, he's awesome. He's one of the people, he preaches a lot of like the sub 2. And so I immediately pitched like a sub 2, which I understand a lot of the viewers of your show, Alex, are going to be a little bit newer. Sub 2, in essence, is a creative way to purchase real estate in which the end buyer is taking out or taking over, in the simplest terms, the financing, any previous mortgage that might exist on a piece of property. The benefit is that it's a more scalable process than getting out a ton of new loans, because most banks have caps on the amount of loans that you can get, debt to equity, all that fun stuff. So I'm like, yeah, we can take over your loan. I'm excited. This sounds like someone who's in distress or in a situation where they could really use a hand. He's not talking to his ex-wife. She doesn't return his calls. They're not on good terms. This house is in foreclosure. It's going to get foreclosed on. It's going to mess up his credit. He needs help. And so what I did was I said, you know what? I'm looking at the comps. I think they had purchased the house for around 220 to 230, I think back in 2017. And in 2019, I called this person for the first time in September. The house was worth, I saw comps for about 320. Comps are, homes that are selling in the area, for people who might not know what a comp is. It's just, you're looking at recently sold homes in the area, finding homes that are similar, gives you a roundabout idea of how much the property will be worth. And so I tell him, you know what, I think we can do this. We can take over the mortgage. We'll put $15,000 in your pocket. He seems happy with that. I'm like, great. Now I got to figure out how to do this. So I go into one of the Facebook groups, Creative Financing with Pace Morby, and I'm like, hey, any sub 2 students in South Carolina? And these 2 great guys got shouted out. It was Alex, he's going to kill me when I jack up his name. Angel Baudon and Michael Yarkeen. They're 2 sub 2 students out of South Carolina. So shout out to these 2 guys. And I started talking with Angel, and he's like, oh, I think we got something here. So the next thing is we got to figure out how we're going to get down there. And, I wanted to go I'm excited. This is what I think is going to be my first deal. Man, I'm already looking at plane tickets down to South Carolina.
Oh yeah.
But who's living in the house is this squatting ex-wife. So I get her contact and I start calling her. And of course, she's a bit standoffish, but I have a conversation with her in which I tell her what we're essentially trying to do, which is potentially purchase the property. And in my mind, I want to build really good rapport with this lady, right? So I end up calling her and I make an agreement. I said, I'm going to call you every day until my flight. I can be there in a week to see the home. And she's like, okay. So I call her every day. 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 And what happens is ultimately I'm literally at the airport and I'm texting her like, hey, I can be there, this, that, and the third. And she goes, sorry, I don't think this is going to work. And so my, newbie real estate investor heart is just shattered. I was excited about this. Now here's an obstacle, right? So we go back to the drawing board and me and Angel and Michael, we start thinking like, man, what can we do here? We've got to figure out how we can really get this thing back on track because we can't see the house. We don't really know what condition it's in, although it's, relatively new, but those are things you want to go and see for yourself as a real estate investor, right? And so while all of that is kind of going on, we're figuring out exactly how we're going to structure it, the paperwork and everything like that. And Angel calls me and said, hey, Pace actually is doing a 24-hour live stream. He's letting the students submit sellers for him to call on. And I was like, what? Like Pace is going to talk to the seller, right? And one of the issues that we were having with the seller, just trying to help him understand, was the sub two. He was an older school guy. He's an awesome guy. He's a military veteran, but he's, a little bit not so caught up on, the different creative ways and everything like that. And so he didn't really grasp the sub two. I'm sure that, I had a lot to do with that, probably just not explaining it in the simplest terms, but Pace ultimately calls him, has a great call with him, and he tells him, forget all the sub two stuff. He looks at the spread of, all the purchasing costs and the mortgage payoff and everything like that, and also the comps for recently sold homes. He says, we'll just buy it. And so I'm reconvening with Angel afterwards, and I'm like, oh, so he said we're just going to buy it. What do you think that means? And it sounds like we're talking about a novation agreement. So Angel and Michael, they're sub two students, so they know everything about novation agreements. So they do the paperwork, and ultimately what ends up happening is at this time I was doing another job. I was living up in New York City. This is while, we're waiting, figuring everything out, paperwork, all that stuff. And Angel calls me, goes, hey, we owe 266 on this, not 230. Because one of the things that I did was I didn't have the exact numbers for the mortgage payoff. Mm-hmm. I had kind of called the bank, the financier for the VA loan that was on the property. And I was like, hey, is the outstanding balance and the past due, that's included, right? And they're like, yeah, it's included. So I'm like, perfect. But when we actually got a mortgage payoff statement, all of the arrears and everything that hadn't been paid because of their financial situation, the seller and the ex-wife, those were on top of, any existing loan balance and everything like that. So we're at 266, not 230. It's not the smoking hot deal that we thought it was, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Sorry. So we're figuring all this out. We ultimately are able to get it under contract. And Angel and Michael, they had a transaction coordinator who they were working with, Love Francis. I think she's also a sub-2 student. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was she's getting ready to sign the paperwork for the novation agreement with the seller. And she calls me and she goes, hey, he doesn't want to sign this. He thought we were just buying it outright and that was it. I'm like, oh, how are we going to do this? And so I call up Larry and I'm like, hey, so, what's going on? I thought we were full steam ahead. I thought everything looked good. He goes, yeah, man, I don't know about this. I thought you guys were just going to buy it outright. I'm going to sell it to you and get, $5,000 in pocket when I could just put it on the market and, I could get, probably 30, 40, $50,000. And I was like, you know what, Larry, you're absolutely right. But then I go, but how are you going to get the ex-wife out of the house? And that's when he was like, you know what? You're right. Like, how am I going to get the ex wife out of the house? And so, it was just a matter of using the rapport that I had and extracting a little bit more pain and just reminding him the situation. Because with pre foreclosure, a lot of them have kind of their heads in the sand, right? They're not really in a position where they're fully aware of just like the gravity and the depth and breadth of their situation. You might not live in this house that you'll lose, but the repercussions for your financial history are not going to be pretty. And it's just a matter of building that rapport and like, Larry, like, I got you. You're good. I got you. And I'm like, so we're good? And he's like, yeah, we're back on track. And I'm like, yes. So I call Angel and Michael. I'm overjoyed. Yes, we got this. Now, how do we figure out with the ex-wife? What we ended up doing was in South Carolina. I know in a lot of states, couples, spouses, right, in situations like divorce situations, because they were divorced, do have a lot of rights in terms of staying in the property. It wasn't necessarily like that in South Carolina. So we were able to figure out and do right by her that she didn't really have any right to being there. She wasn't on the mortgage and she also wasn't on the title. That's one thing I do want to clarify. She was not on the mortgage. She was not on the title. The seller owned everything with regards to this house. So we ended up writing her a sale of property notice. We gave her some time. She, I guess, took some time to digest it. She calls us up. Hey, can you guys give me until, mid-December, I think is what she asked for. And she said, yep, we can do that. We ended up helping her out, giving her some money to, find, and we actually helped her find a new property to reside in, one that would let her keep her cats. And we ended up closing on it. It ended up, being a little bit of a rocky road. The spread wasn't what we thought, but we netted about 20 pre-tax. It was a 60-40 split, 60 to Angel and Midel and 40% to me. And I got a check for $8,058.94. And at that time, it was the biggest check I'd ever seen in my life. And from then I was hooked. It was like, I got to do it again at some point. I don't know when it's going to be, but I'm going to do this again and I'm not going to stop.
Oh my gosh. Yep. And that's just kind of a testament to the ups and downs of each deal. Of course, you're going to have those lay downs, but oftentimes because we're stepping into a situation where we're helping a homeowner out of something that an agent would have no idea how to handle this. They're just going to be like, well, we'll just list it. But all those different things, the wife and the property, all that stuff, they're not going to know what to do with. So it's, that's awesome that you got to help him out and then land your first deal. Now, would you suggest that newbies go for pre-foreclosures, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say, yeah, go after everything. If you're new, a big part of it is just finding out what you're good at and just like replicating that. So go after pre foreclosures, go after vacants, go after water shutoffs, go after out of state investors, and really just niche down and figure out what you're good at, which situations you're really good at building rapport in, and repeat that. One of the things that Max and a lot of the Pace, all these guys will always say is, the best list or the best lead or the best different type of distress situation that you can go after is the one that you're going to do consistently. So I would really say, consistency is one of the biggest things.
Okay. And that's great. Yeah. Cause I do notice, a lot of people just starting out, they'll text, like 200 people or something, and they'll be like, oh man, I reached out to all these people and nothing's happening, and then once you really break down the numbers, you kind of notice, okay, it's not consistent. You did a couple days here, a couple days there. What are your best practices for keeping consistent?
Yeah. Best practices for keeping consistent. I think you just said it, Alex, is is just consistent action every day. And that's still one of the things that I struggle with, is just moving the needle forward, right? I think once you start taking days off, you're not calling, you're not texting, you're not networking with end buyers or agents or however type, whatever type of business you run, you got to be putting something into the tank every day. Just stay consistent, call, text, network. If it's running comps, anything, just keep your foot on it, because what I've realized is that once I start, it's like one of the laws of inertia. I can't remember. It's been a while since I took a physics class, right? But an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion. The more you rest, the easier it's going to be to rest. The more you keep at it and you're building your excitement, you're building your energy levels, you're building your knowledge base, you're building your network, that's going to become an obsession. And that's the way. I think that's one of the reasons why you hear a lot of the guys that people might follow on Instagram or YouTube. A lot of the bigger real estate investors, like the Maxwells and the Paces and the Nicks and stuff, Nick Perry and stuff like that, is they'll say like, "Oh, it took me such and such amount of time to do my first deal, but once I did that, I was obsessed and I had to keep going. I wasn't going to stop." So it really has to be an obsession. Like, it has to be like, I'm going to make this work one way or another, but one thing I'm not going to do is quit on myself.
I love
That's
that.
what it takes to be consistent.
That's great. Yeah. I think Max was one of the first guys I saw too. And I saw him give a speech. I think he was down here in SoCal, and he said that he's like, if you want to get started, you have to become obsessed. You have to start listening to podcasts. He's like, don't listen to music anymore. Listen to podcasts. Listen to
Right.
just anything all the time, because there's so much information you have to download, and then it kind of just takes over, and you start building that momentum. So I think that's a great thing for definitely a lot of new people to kind of grasp. What would you say was the hardest thing about this whole process? Going back to the first deal, what was the hardest thing?
Man, there were so many unexpected challenges. It was just keeping everybody on the same page. I mean, this was a person, great guy, by the way. Larry, the seller, was. This was a person who he didn't have a whole lot of um, external advice as far as his situation. He had kids and everything like that and had extended family, but it didn't seem like he had a whole lot of understanding as to, again, the brevity of his situation. So it comes first with just like building that rapport, building that relationship. He was an awesome guy, like super charismatic, just who happened to be caught up in a really crappy situation. I think one of the hardest thing was just getting it to the closing. That was the hardest thing, was just getting it to closing. I remember at the end, something that ended up happening, or that I found out after the fact, was he actually had a brother-in-law who had called Angel and Michael and was blowing them up and was like, "What are you doing to him? He's not good with his money. You guys are scamming him,"
Mm-hmm.
all these different things. And that's when we had to go back and say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I understand your level of frustration of you not knowing that Larry was selling the house, but here are all of the ways that we helped him." And it goes back to building value and making sure that we're actually building value and bringing value and actually solving a problem. We're not creating problems, we're solving problems, right? This was a deal, as we touched on, that a wholesaler would have come to and said, 320 ARV, 266 for, all in, prior to any repairs, because there were some repairs. Not a deal. Agent, how do I get the ex-wife out of the house? This was a specific situation where creative financing was the only thing that could have prevented this house from going to pre-foreclosure and messing up this amazing individual's financial future. He was an older gentleman, right? So just a super niche type of situation. But if it had been a situation where honestly there had been time to say, hey, let's get you an agent. I know agents. I would have done that. This was a specific situation, but we did have a brother-in-law come out, and we had to be able to show value, right? Here's everything we did. We fixed the roof, right? There was water stains and mold in the roof and everything like that. We helped the ex-wife because she also would have been without a house. We helped the ex-wife. We found her a place to stay. We threw her some money. We paid for her moving fees, right? And we fixed this person's financial future, from getting absolutely obliterated. So we brought a ton of value to the situation, and that's where we were able to go and say, hey, like, we did a lot. We fixed the roof. We put this on the market. We cleaned it up. We helped Larry. We helped the ex-wife. Everybody came out of this situation a lot better because we got involved than they would have had we not gotten involved, or someone else who was really good with creative financing, you know.
Sure. Yeah, I'm noticing a lot of the people that are successful in this business, they kind of have that the service mode, how it's about solving the problems, and then as you do solve the problems, the bigger the problem, the bigger the check. So that's great to have that.
Absolutely.
So now moving on from your first deal, let's go ahead and tell people sort of your future in real estate. What are you looking to accomplish this year? And then how can people partner with you?
Yeah. So what I'm looking to accomplish this year is long-term future in real estate. I definitely do want to get into like the development game, like larger multifamily developments. Right now, I'm focusing specifically still on wholesale. But also my primary focus is land wholesaling. I really got into the land wholesaling niche um, recently as of this year. So I actually have a deal under contract right now. I'm trying to sell about 6 acres in Charlotte in a residential development. So calling builders, calling hedge funds, everything like that. So sort of have pivoted to land. I'm definitely going to stay involved in house wholesaling and everything like that. But one of the things that I've noticed with land so far is that there's just a lot less emotional attachment that people have, generally speaking, to their land. It's more, am I getting the number that I want? It's not, you know, do I have to talk to this person and this person and this person to sell it? Where am I going to live after the fact? So it's more of a simple transaction. And so what I am noticing is that I'm able to get a little bit more leads, like per my spend on marketing, texting, calling, everything like that. But as far as getting in touch with me, I'm on Facebook. I had been off Facebook for a few years, but figured I would get back into it specifically just for networking and real estate stuff and everything like that. So hit me up on Facebook at Davin Burnell. That's DAVIN BURNELL. I'm also on Instagram at Davin Javan Burnell. So DAVINJAVANBURNELL. So hit me up on there. I'm always open to networking, talking real estate, doing deals with anybody. And I'm excited. Thanks so much, Alex, for, having me on the platform. This is amazing. I'm honestly honored. I never had thought that anybody would reach out about anything like this, and it was never in my plans, but an opportunity presented itself. So thanks for having me on and this
I
amazing
appreciate you, man.
platform.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think the land space is a good move because I mean I know so many people that they don't know what to do with it. They're just like, I get these land deals reaching out to homeowners and I just pass them over. So there has to be something there. There's definitely maybe like less competition, I would say, just because when everybody starts they'll go right into residential. So that's I'm really excited to see kind of where you go from there. And then you get to cherry pick, if you're getting into development, you find your piece of land, boom, now we're ready to build. So that's super cool. Stoked to hear how that goes. Really quick, as we're getting to the end, please, you guys subscribe to the podcast for weekly motivation. Send this to someone brand new. And don't let them quit. Just share these stories with people, because that first deal seems a million miles away. And then right after this episode, go and show Davin some love on his Instagram and Facebook and all that. And now, Davin, send us home. Give us one piece of advice that you would give yourself before you got this first deal under your belt.
Pick up the phone and start dialing. I'll use the line from Wolf of Wall Street. Pick up pick up the phone and start dialing. You know, in this business, just any new venture, period. Business, new hobby, new job, anything like that. I think there's always this initial level of trepidation of, is this going to work? Am I going to be able to do it? Is it worth my time? But the thing is, you can't actually answer any of those questions and still until you start actually taking action. I know when I was getting started, it's like, okay, I got to make all these scripts and I got to build my buyers list and I got to do all these things before I pick up the phone and start dialing, right? But really what that was in retrospect was it was a certain level of fear of, I don't know if this is going to work, right? But I guarantee you, if you just pick up the phone and start dialing, start texting, something will pop up. There is going to be another lead out there, right? There's going to be another Lawrence, right? Who's in need of help, who's in need of your help. And you have a specific solution for him, but you've got to call him first. And I guarantee you that once you do call him, the answers and the pathway will make themselves available to you. I learned so much throughout this process about squatting rights. I learned a little bit about marriage laws. I learned obviously about novations. I learned about sub two. I learned about networking and building relationships. I learned about how to talk to attorneys. Learned so much, but it only started with me taking that leap of faith and saying, I'm going to call. And then all of those things followed after. But you got to be consistent. You got to be consistent. So pick up the phone every day, start dialing, start texting. And you can do it. I'm rooting for you. Alex is rooting for you. You will do it, but you got to take that action. And everything else, I promise you, everything else will figure itself out. You'll figure out how to build the relationships necessary to make it happen for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, man. Okay, so you guys reach out to Davin, and I look forward to do some deals with you, man. So, and we'll be in touch. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alex.
All right, see you, man.
Absolutely. Bye.